Hello, hello. Ooh, feedback. Also, we have a very beautiful ceiling, so I just want everyone to take a minute to just look up, please. Just lean back, calmly take 5 seconds to take in the ceiling for me, please. You can make appreciative noises if you like. Thank you. That's the kind of energy we want in the panel today. Thank you. Okay. We are here to talk, you may have guessed, about impact. And I've never seen my head that large, so if we can lose that, that would be really brilliant. So we are here to talk about journalistic impact. Is the sound level okay? Yeah? Okay, good.
I don't hear you. Yeah.
You don't hear me?
No.
But I'm sitting right next to you.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's weird.
All right. So the framing of this panel is really to look at what we're going to go through the lens of 4 different organizations and how they see and think about journalistic impact and how they measure it, how they deal with it, and what their what their respective methods and approaches to it are. You know, we talk about impact a lot in journalism. You know, I've been working in this field for longer than I'm prepared to admit publicly, and during that time, I've seen multiple cycles of people define impact in different ways, and we've had donors define impact, and investors define impact, and journalists, and communities, and all sorts of different parts of the ecosystem share what they think impact is. And today, through the 4 colleagues I have next to me, we're going to go through different aspects. They're going to take you through how their organizations think of and approach it, and how they capture it, and how they communicate it. So time is short. I'm just going to introduce them each by name and organization. I'm not going to go through their entire CV. You have LinkedIn, you have the bios on the website. But we're going to start, I just want to say also we're Ariadne, who's second from the left, is replacing, has very kindly agreed to step in to replace Cici Wei, who was unable to travel because she was ill. So I just want to wave and say thank you and sorry, Cici, that you were unable to come, and thank you to Ariadne for stepping in. We're going to start with Flora Pereira. Are we? Yes. Who is from the Pulitzer Center. So, and each of them is going to share a sort of overview of how they work, and then we'll go into more detail and talk through in a more fluid way. But they're going to start each with a short set of slides and to ground you in how they think about it each. Okay, Flora.
Yes. Did the presentation work in the end? If not, I think that's... Oh, yes, because I think we're going to start with Jasmine.
My apologies. We're starting with Jasmine Acuña from...
Paraguay.
From Paraguay, but from El Surti, right?
Yes.
All right.
Thank you. Okay, thank you, Samir. I'm Jasmine Acuña. I'm going to start by explaining a bit what we have been doing for the past 9 years in Paraguay. El Surtidor, it's a digital news outlet right in the middle of South America. We have become known for our visual journalism, which is the combination of original reporting with very striking, attractive images that we get from pop culture, movies, comics, even memes. When we launched 9 years ago, we had the challenge of catching the attention of people, especially young audiences. And our answer to that challenge was to produce visual journalism that can spread like memes spread, basically. Journalism that's easy to read, easy to understand, and easy to share, where we communicate, social media and messenger apps. Since then, we have grown an audience, and we have managed to catch their attention towards issues such as the climate crisis, gender, inequality, disinformation, human rights abuses, and, and topics like that. But over the years, the gatekeeping of big tech has become much more difficult to deal with. Disinformation has only become worse. And our audience gave us signs of news exhaustion and a desire to do more. So we began to reassess how we measure the value of our work, and we started to question this attention-driven approach, because it started to become clear to us that it's only partially true that people need accurate information to mobilize in the right direction. If that idea is true, then this information shouldn't be a problem. Also, we have data that shows how people, especially new audiences, are looking for more. They're looking for connection, they're looking for belonging, they're looking for meaning when they're trying to satisfy their information needs. So with these questions, we revise our mission and we turn our attention as a newsroom towards impact. And impact for us means change. Today, we think of ourselves as a newsroom that enables connections around information that can drive change. We recognize that we play a role in change making, and our goal is to help people take action on behalf of themselves for change. So to achieve our mission, we organize our work into different stages and we use different tools. For instance, we design a map for impact with theory of change tools. The impact map is an exercise of articulating with the newsroom the change that a report can achieve. We visualize the change-making process of a story. For example, in the map for impact, we identify what are the most effective messages of the story that we have to get out there. And we also identify the relevant stakeholders that have to get those messages because they can take actions that can lead to different forms of change. This impact map helps us understand that content alone does not lead to change. And planning for impact also allows us to distribute information more strategically because we're thinking about what the relevant stakeholders are that have to receive our information. If we think it's necessary, we also hold in-person spaces to facilitate connections and facilitate civic action. We tap on our power to convene people. In these spaces, we also make sure that dialogue is not restricted or defined by algorithms, and we make sure that we connect the stakeholders that can drive more structural forms of change. How do we measure the impact of all of this work? Well, we have different indicators of impact, such as awareness, amplification and endorsement, grassroots organizing, accountability, and systemic change. There's a slide with that. So, for instance, if a member of our audience tags a politician in a publication, we think that's amplification and endorsement for us. Or if people use our findings to protest, which has happened several times, that's grassroots organizing. Or if a politician reacts to our report, feels compelled to react to a story, that's accountability. Everyone in the newsroom is in charge of documenting impact when they see it. All of us make an effort to keep a record in a database. And I would like to finish here, by saying 3 things about this impact-driven approach to journalism. I think it is much more aligned with the idea of journalism as a service. It is also much more satisfying for the newsroom and the audience. I think it is a win-win approach. And I would like to finish by showing something that a member of our audience told us in a gathering that we had in our newsroom. That person told us, "You gave us the information, now it is on us to turn it into action." And that's exactly what we look for with this impact-driven approach to our journalism. Thank you.
Next. Sorry, we have a slight reshuffle in terms of order of presentation, so we're going to go to Marina Diaz from Agencia Pública.
Well, hello everyone. I'm Marina Diaz. I am a journalist, and for the last 11 years, I've been working at Agência Pública in Brazil, and I'm in charge of communications and impact strategy for Agência Pública. And I'm so glad to be here today. Thank you for being here. Well, I'll share with you how we have been monitoring our impact and how we build a methodology tool for that, and why monitor impact is so important for us. But first, I'll tell you quickly about Agência Pública. We are the first nonprofit investigative journalism newsroom in Brazil. We are an agency, so we distribute our stories for several media outlets, and we were founded and we are led by women journalists since 2011. We investigate all kinds of human rights violations, climate change, and threats to democracy. Well, we define impact as when someone, a single person, an organization, a government, makes a decision based on information that we disclosed. As time went by and Publica grew, we understood that monitor impact helps us to show the importance of our work and of journalism itself to the world, to our stakeholders, to our readers, to funders. And knowing how to communicate impact leads to a more engaged audience. And for us, impact helps when people are empowered and encouraged to act on information. So here I brought two examples. One, both of them are from a story we published on one of Brazil's best-known, the owner of one of Brazil's best-known retail chains that we discovered that for more than 30 years he maintained a network of sexual exploitation of girls, including this was happening within the company's own headquarters. So our report inspired the creation of a law increasing the deadline for reparations to victims of sexual violence, which is this story that we published on our website. And also, this second photo is last month, for the International Women's Day, a group of women protested in front of Casas Bahia, this retail network, this retail chain, in a street named after this man, Samuel Klein. And they demand that men like him are no longer honored in public places. And they were holding signs. They printed our story, and they were holding signs with our story printed. But well, how do we monitor impact? It was a long journey. This has evolved over time. So we started with messy emails and spreadsheets, Google Docs that got lost. And in 2020, we created the first version of our impact monitoring tool, which is now called Publica IQ, but at the time it wasn't. It ran on a WordPress site, and it was fed both with alerts by Basumo, so every mention of the name Agência Pública was retrieved by the system, and also with inputs from our team. And this is so important. It's amazing to have our team engaged and sending us everything they see that mention Publica. It doesn't matter if it's something that was published or if it was a conversation that they had with someone and the person told them, oh, I used the story on my work. So in 2022, we went 2 steps back, and in 2023, since 2023, we have been working in Publica IQ as we have now. So it now uses AI to analyze the mentions to our work. And so it analyzes every mention we have from Agência Pública, and it also classifies this impact. So it can be an impact when it's really something that changed over our report, or if it's a repercussion, an award. So here is basically how Publica IQ works. So it's linked to our website, and it gets those mentions, and it also discards false positives, and then it analyzes and associates the mentions by type and assigns to the corresponding specific story. This is just an outline of how Publica IQ works. I won't go too much in detail, but these are the steps that the mention, every mention goes through in the system. And good news is, by the next month, we will have some other organizations in Brazil starting to test Publica IQ, because we want this to be used by other newsrooms.
Okay, thank you, Marina.
Not the microphone.
So, predictably, we have a slight hiccup with a couple of the presentations, so I'm going to go and sort that out over there. And in the meantime, I'm going to ask you all, Flora and Ariadne, your presentations are going to be loaded in about 20 seconds' time. But in the meantime, I was wondering if you could start, Flora, if you could start talking about your work with the Pulitzer Center, and I'll go and do some fiddling with a screwdriver.
Sure. So thank you, everyone. Really excited to be here with colleagues. We've worked together before, so I think it's a very potential panel. I'm Flora Pereira. I'm Chief of Engagement of the Pulitzer Center. So Pulitzer Center, we fund journalism stories that are normally untold. We fund investigative journalism, but I think the difference is that we don't want to stop once the story is published. We want journalists to go beyond. We want, and my colleagues heard me saying that many times, squeeze the juice of the journalism. We don't want journalists to be a commodity once that is produced and then left behind. And that the impact that it can cause, it's only the moment of the publication. We want to see this impact, trying to push for this impact, to squeeze the juice of this story on, and see the long tail of it. And we are based in 4 hubs, so my slides, I will need to pass all of them first, but that's fine. We are based on 4 hubs, and the US is one of them, Latin America, Africa, especially the Congo Basin, and Southeast Asia. But we support stories and journalists and engagement and civic action worldwide. And we work in 4 main issues, and the issues that we work, it's AI, global health, climate, especially focused with rainforest, but not only, human rights, and I'm probably forgetting one right now, but again, we go, peace and conflict. We go beyond, but we are trying to make choices and prioritize where we want to work and what we want to work with, and this is related to what we are sharing in terms of impact. I brought a couple of insights that at least were useful for us, or what we have been using and thinking when thinking and strategizing about impact. The first, they are not very welcome most of the time with all the journalists. Sometimes we find resistance, sometimes we don't. I think it depends. But I think the first thing is we need to be intentional about impact. And I think many of you heard here or there that journalists doesn't need to have or shouldn't have this type of approach. But I think maybe it's because of wrong definition of what even impact means, because impact means good use of our resources and time. So if you want to talk with everyone, it's already know you're talking to no one. So who are you talking to, and who do you want to get, and who needs to read your story? So you need to be thinking about these things. And I think the other thing is, how do you prove impact? Because I think there are things, and I wish I had the slides because it's a lot of terms, but we try to create a theory of change where out there, in the long-term impact, we call it impact, we use that word, is something that you're not responsible alone. Like you can say that story will lead to this impact, but you can hope for. You can hope that in 5 years, 10 years. Of course, sometimes we are lucky as journalists to publish a story and then the next day you see a law changing or a policy change happening, but that's not always. But sometimes it is the effect of your story and a domino effect that is changing something in 5 or 10 years. So you need to create that trace. So that's impact for us. Before impact, we are naming outcomes. Outcomes is something that is still long-term, is still a long-term result, but you need at least to prove that your story or our civic action engagement has something to do with it, that you are directly related. And then right here, right now, is what we say outputs. Outputs are directly results. It's publishing a story, it's driving a dialogue with students, is things that by the end of a year, let's say, you can prove that you've done. Because some things that it is what is in our reach to report on. We cannot report, we cannot say, I'm publishing a story and that story is going to change a law. Or that story, it's impossible, we don't know, right? So we are trying to create a theory of change to show how is the flow of the impact. And I also wanted to share what is impact. What do you think is impact? Because yes, it can be a policy change, but for us at the Pulitzer Center, it can also be an aha moment from a student. So maybe this student had this aha now with us, but in 20 years, you will see something different. And just in those 3 days that I've been here, I've been talking to journalists and they were sharing stories of things they published 7 years ago. And now they are seeing huge changes. I remember, I'm not a journalist, this is reporting, but I was for a while. And I remember reporting in 15 years, people that were in a course I was giving about African reporting, are now big names in the journalism or big names in African issues in Brazil. So it's something that I would never relate it to. So you can see, there is a chain of reaction that takes time to happen. The other thing that we think is super important is more research and less assumption. So a pattern that we have seen a lot in the journalist field is that people assume the audience don't know. Especially journalists, we assume audience don't know about the issue that we are talking. But we've been talking to people in the audience, in the one-to-ones, in the offline approach and events that we've been holding, and we heard so many interesting questions. We heard questions in the students, university students in the Amazon. I know the forest is burning, but what can I do? So what is my role? What kind of action can I provide? I can try to arrive to my slide, but we're already in the middle. Okay, so 4 hubs, issues, intentional. Oh, this is the theory of change. So just stop for 1 second there, but I'll go back. And I'm here, so more research and less assumption, and those are the phrases that we heard. From Southeast Asia to the middle of the Amazon in Brazil, what can I do about it? Can I make the difference? Does my voice matter? So many of the times we got, when learning about our public, when learning about the audience we wanted to reach, that they actually knew. So if they knew, they didn't need only information, they need tools, they needed more. In that case, what we created was letter for local governments. So beyond, we went there, we presented the reporting. It was super important because it's powerful, the reporting for the students. But then we also said, what about if you, inspired by this reporting, write a letter to your local government? And we had a really great impact this year, a couple of months ago. One of the students that wrote a letter got a personal answer from Marina Silva, that's the Minister of Environment in Brazil, and that the minister published everywhere the answer to that letter, knowing then how important it was that students were asking action to the government. The other thing that we find journalists have a lot of difficulty to do is choosing an audience. Again, we want to try to avoid boiling the ocean. So when people come to tell me about a story they want to be found, I normally ask, okay, but who needs to hear? And how are you making sure you will plan distribution for that target, for that specific audience. And here it's a very practical example. I think Marina have seen this slide once in her life before, but it's an effective question. If you would tell, no, imagine your family, you probably have some that look like, with these 3 persons in your family, if you need to talk about climate and convince them how important it is, I'm sure you have to use a different approach for each one of them, and a different messenger, and probably a different messenger that you care about, they would care about a different person. The other thing, and I think it's related to the previous point about knowing the issue or not knowing the issue, we also try to understand where people are in the engagement curve, like how do they relate it to the issue that you are talking about? Because if they don't know nothing about, that's fine, you can just provide information. But if they know, information won't make a difference to them. So they need more, they need to be sensitized. And I think what we have been learning is that the messenger really matters. No, first we map, prioritize, and there isn't one audience. I also wanted to say that. It's prioritizing, because of course you will say, oh, I want everybody to read my story. We all want that, of course. But you need to prioritize, you need to choose so you can plan. So when you do that, when you prioritize the segment and you prioritize the level of engagement that a segment has with your story, then you need to care that. Pulitzer, I brought some examples, but I don't know how I am in time. I need to close. I just brought some examples of how we have, after the story is published, transforming it into new things. So we bring creating exhibitions, we're creating cartoons, and I just wanted to quickly share that we had a huge also policy change in the Congo Basin, working with students. The Ministry of Education incorporated environmental issues into the curriculum of the basic and high school. We've working with teachers and educators, and the idea was to go beyond the outlet, and also creating room, creating critical spaces, trying to go online. Yes, we're not saying we shouldn't go, but we should understand that it's a funnel. So if you go online, if you're working with content creators, if you're doing digital campaigns, this is needed, but it's needed as something seen as catching the big audiences and then bringing that to the funnel, bringing that to building that engagement curve until they can become actors of change. And finally, I think just to conclude, we think it's needed to measure. I think we need to be accountable as well to our own results. So when we define the outputs, we at the Pulitzer Center indicate metrics, and indicators and metrics, they are both qualitatives and quantitatives. Yes, numbers still matters, readership still matters, but I think all the other examples I gave for us are also very important. How are people changing awareness? How are people critical thinking about the issues, policy changes, and so on. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Flora, and thank you. I'm really sorry about the technical issue. I apologize. Ariadne.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much, all of you, for bringing me into this important conversation at the last minute, this amazing women-led panel. And Samir, I really appreciate it. And I hope, Cece, if you're listening, you feel better, and encourage everyone to read Cece Wei's work, which for me was certainly an early inspiration when I started getting involved in developing Lighthouse Reports' impact, approach to impact and impact strategy. And I think that, slides. So these, hopefully, you're gonna hear kind of elements of the approach in ours that are reflected in what everybody else said. So I'm gonna try to fly through these slides, which hopefully have relevant content on them, given that they came together in the last half hour. I hope it all makes sense. But just a note about who we are. So again, I'm Ariadne Papagapitos. I am Director of Impact, a co-director at Lighthouse Reports, and we are a relatively small investigative team behind impact-driven accountability journalism. And because we are not a platform, we don't publish, our stories appear on media partner platforms reaching audiences in the millions, on platforms that these audiences already know and trust and engage with. So we've worked with 150 plus media partners in the last 5 years since our inception. And our team is made up of journalists, editors, but also technical experts, so skills including coding, data science, financial forensics, and so we bring all of these things together and kind of put them in service of systemic stories and stories that drive change. So this kind of not being a platform is very much core to our model. It means that we are dependent on and really value collaborations and partnerships in many different ways. It also frees us up to invest in and think strategically about impact. Okay, great. So just really quickly, we have 2 key goals as an organization. We want to innovate in the fields of collaborative journalism, and most relevant to this discussion, we want to make progress on the big issues that we cover. So we're quite clear about our desire to make change with our work and to serve people. Great. Okay, so I'm just going to run very quickly through the sort of building blocks of our impact model rather than kind of walk you through the entire approach, and then move to an example that can possibly illustrate this. So impact at Lighthouse is a core part of our editorial and investigative process. That means that the planning for impact happens in tandem and is interlinked with the investigative process. And what we're trying to do is cultivate an impact mindset across our entire team so that the impact work doesn't just live with the impact team, which is myself and my wonderful colleague, impact editor Tessa Pang. It's actually owned by everyone, so all of the journalists and editors and technical experts that are on the team kind of get involved in developing the impact strategy around each investigation. So how we do it is, we have a number of tools, like others have described, that we've developed to help us kind of do this strategic planning, which is in essence what it is, right? So it's planning that drives reporting, it's planning that drives audience engagement and sort of defines the outcomes that we're striving for and kind of indicators of progress to understand whether or not we're on the right track to meeting those big, huge outcomes, like the ambitious ones, changing narratives, changing law, changing attitudes, et cetera. And as I said earlier, partnerships are at the heart of this. We really see ourselves as part of a system of actors that we call our community of accountability. So, different organizations that are using different tools to make change on a really entrenched issue. So we are in constant conversation with the whole ecosystem of actors about how to support their work. And these are relationships of trust that we've built over time. And our partners, impact partners, I'll just call them our community of accountability, they build momentum around our investigations and deliver our findings to critical audiences and help make change with those. We are trying to become, like was said by others, much more creative about our product. So how to reach influential audiences, how to best do that, how to reach beyond the choir, so to speak, or the usual suspects. And we want to intentionally lose some of the learned habits of investigative journalism, like aiming only for long reads or famous mastheads and this kind of thing. So our product can be a drama series, it can be short videos for social media, 3D models, policy briefs, podcasts, et cetera, et cetera. And then finally, I'll just say that we understand that systemic change, we recognize that as a complex and very messy thing. It's a process into which many actors contribute, and we don't believe that a bright line can be drawn between a positive change and a single investigation or even a single organization. So we try to approach this work with a lot of humility. Okay, so a quick example to sort of illustrate the approach, as I said, rather than kind of walking us through the steps. This is an investigation that we published at the end of last year called Poison PR, which exposed a company that was pushing harmful pesticides around the world, pesticides that have been banned in the EU. And at the same time as kind of pushing these pesticides out to farmers, they were keeping a base of files of activists, scientists, academics, and others who were all trying to curtail the use of these pesticides and going after them. And so, ooh, beautiful. So just as an example of an impact plan from that particular investigation. So we have a number of tools. These tools help us map audience, power map, develop goals, and kind of a strategy for how to meet the needs of those audiences, how to reach them. We zero in on specific audiences where we think our findings can make a difference, which is what you see kind of on the left-hand column. And this looks all very neat and pretty, at least to me, it looks very pretty, because this is an example of an impact strategy or roadmap that's in its final stage. But what I want to emphasize is that, like, at the beginning, it's essentially a series of very sort of messy conversations, figuring out, like, who do we need to speak to, who are the audiences that need to see our findings, in what format, in what language, how can we engage with them, and how can they best use the findings of our investigations. So, we're constantly learning from others in the field, in our community of accountability, and that's informing our strategy and our process for outreach. So just lastly and really quickly, some of the outcomes from the Poison PR investigation was that the company lost a number of contracts, which is cool, which is a big one, yay. And they also, really importantly, dismantled that network of profiles that I mentioned of scientists and academics that they were chasing after that were trying to hinder their work. And another really important outcome is that many of the farmers who were using these pesticides that didn't have information about how harmful they were able to learn about it and figure out some alternatives. So what you're seeing on this slide is a kind of an example of a couple of strategies that we pursued in order to arrive at those outcomes. So with the affected community, so local farmers and even politicians in Kenya that didn't know about how bad the pesticides are, our partner Africa Uncensored, which you see over there on my right, helped us take the findings short to farmers and lead a screenshot from an Instagram reel of theirs and ours. We also made sure that civil society experts and other industry experts were part of the work along the way, so their push is really what led to the company kind of losing the contracts. And we knew that it would resonate with diverse audiences, right? So we reached out to a lot of different influencers with mass reach who would be interested in the findings from this investigation, but who we don't normally engage with, and that's how the investigation ended up mentioned on the Joe Rogan podcast, which, as you likely know, has a massive reach and following, and is quite connected to a movement called Make America Healthy Again. So I'll stop. Bottom is just a screenshot of one of the screenings in Kenya with farmers.
Thank you, Ariadne. Thank you, all of you, for. I think, sometimes it's difficult to know how much time to give, for presentations to breathe and for you to understand and get into these things. We don't. The slots are not immensely long, so. We're always balancing to try and understand, but to me, that was a really, you each gave us a real drill down into some of the, really holistic view on how you conceive of it, how it impacts people beyond your organization, how you are working with journalism in various different ways to kind of look at the wider role in society of journalism, the wider ripple effects, what it can unlock, what this particular mode of working and dealing with information can unlock in society and for different kinds of communities. And in the environment that we're in right now, we have about 10 minutes left So I want to sort of, in those 10 minutes, we've got time to maybe address 1, 2 kind of key questions each. So, we could cover a bunch of different things. The thing that I really want to understand is that, none of you are coming into this, none of your organizations are there to preserve the status quo. You've all talked a lot about change, a lot about agency. So I want to talk, I'd like each of you to sort of reflect on what are the sort of changes that you're seeing beyond, that are unintended, that are beyond, we live in a very complex, difficult environment. To have impact for your journalism and for your work and the mobilization and engagement efforts to have impact, you are competing in an incredibly messy environment, often an asymmetric environment, sometimes a dangerous environment. So what are you seeing in terms of changes that are happening in that way that you didn't expect, or that you're seeing that are sort of, you're running up against things that would be barriers, but actually you're overcoming them? And the second thing is, for your organizations, what is this changing concretely for you, whether it's in terms of the way in which journalism is done, or it's in terms of revenue, it could be in terms of how your funders treat you, or, try and pick out 1 or 2 highlights of that each. Does that make sense? Or yes? Okay. Marina, maybe.
So talking about impact helps us a lot to bond with our audience. I think in the middle of last year, we started sending emails to our members, the membership program donors, telling what happened to our stories. And this is a success. People love it, and people see value on what Publica does. It's a way of showing them, hey, here's what you're funding. And it has been amazing. In this story, we launched a about this story I brought here, Samuel Klein's story, and we invited, this podcast was funded by our readers, and we invited the readers to hear the podcast for the first time in our newsroom. And it was amazing. It made them like ambassadors of the whole thing. And when they see like people with signs on the streets in a story that they help it to fund, it's just amazing. It brings us, it shows the value of the work.
Okay. Flora.
I think the biggest change that we are seeing, I'm an audience-obsessed person, so you will see on my answer that as well. And my aha moment, and I think the biggest change that we have is in the way we connect with audiences. I think journalism is historically top-down field, where outlets were used to publish and automatically reach their audiences, and now we live in this super fragmented world that we have huge outlets. The most successful outlets in the world today are facing issues with fragmentation as well. And you'll be surprised, because I'm always asking outlets we work with who's their audience, you would be surprised how many people have answered that it's 40 plus. That means it's a dying field. So or we adapt, or we start reaching new audiences, or in 20 years people are not reading journalism. No, we have more than enough surveys to prove that. So I think that connecting to audiences and knowing that what they think matters, and if they are saying we are not reading in the current format, and we need to adapt. Again, it's not completely changing. We still need to address the 40 plus, but we need to think sustainable about the field itself and diversifying the channels. For me, my aha moment, I think I worked with women's rights before, and as I mentioned, African issues, and when I started working with environment issues, I remember I was in a conversation, and someone said, this is the most important issue of our time, and I have heard the same phrase in the last 2 movements I was working with. And that was, okay, I got it. No, everyone think, because I think everyone is in this room that chose journalism really care about their issue. They really, and we automatically think that because we care, other people will as well. But it doesn't happen that way. So I think it's that type of connection with the audiences that we need to change. And what changed in the organization, to say very briefly, is that we are being more rigorous in asking the journalists that questions, like who they want to reach and how they are going to reach and how they are taking back that to the community they are serving.
Thank you. Ariadne.
So I'll start with the expected part, and then I'll go to the unexpected in answer to your question. So, one of the things that we're really trying to do, or that we feel responsible for doing, is democratizing access to our findings, and that it's really a misconception that because the story is out there and the investigation is out there, that it's accessible to everyone. That is not the case. Of course, we know people are inundated with information, and of course their information environment is very different. And so, thinking about journalism as a public service, part of that is about delivery. The unexpected part, I would say, is that that's actually been really empowering for us too, right? So again, as a non-platform, we publish together with media partners. That's where our stories come out. And this process of learning that we can also engage directly with audience, learn from them, learn about their needs, and actually figure out how to strengthen our product and the additional products that we put out outside of the media partner kind of long read has been really empowering and has given us more agency as well in the work.
Thank you. Hasmin.
Well, I really like the word that you use, the concept, the impact mindset. I think that the biggest transformation sometimes when we adopt an impact approach to journalism is within the newsroom. It raises the morale of journalists and editors. They feel that all that effort they put into their reporting doesn't end with publishing. They start to understand that publishing is the beginning of a story sometimes. They become much more aware of the evolution of the findings, and they start to see themselves as part of, like you said, part of an ecosystem. Like you are one part of a big ecosystem, and change-making, impact-making is a messy process. And your job, yes, it's about the reporting, but also making sure that that reporting reaches the people that need to hear, that need to see, that need to watch your findings, your data, your information, because they can do something with it. So I think that's one of the biggest benefits and one of the biggest, transformations that happen when we adopt an impact-driven approach to journalism.
Thank you, all four of you. I think you can show your appreciation and the impact they've had on you by the loudness of your, maybe cheer a little bit. All right, thank you everyone. Thank you, Marina, Flora, Ariadne, and Hasmin. Thank you.